Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandra Martini, a Biosecurity Game Changers Fellow and Seminar Coordinator together with my colleague Choco. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the fourth seminar in the Biosecurity Game Changers Fellow Series. This series aims to advance dialogue on biosecurity by bringing together diverse voices to explore how we can strengthen safeguards and be able to ensure that science, technology, and innovations are conducted in a way that is safe and secure. Today, we explore a very important topic, and that is regional policies on mitigating risks associated with AI-enabled biodesign. So AI has really changed a number of fields in the life sciences, and we shall be harnessing, and we are continually harnessing the positive impact of AI, but it has also added a very different layer of risk. So the different policies, regional policies, have to be looked into to ensure that while we harness the positives of AI-enabled biodesign, the risks are also addressed. So today we have our moderator, John, who is one of the Biosecurity Game Changers Fellows. He will be guiding the discussion on this very important topic with our very distinguished panelists. At this point, I would like to pass the microphone over to John. John, over to you.
Thanks, Sandra. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. And welcome to today's Biosecurity Game Changers webinar. My name is John Aristisant, and I'm also a Biosecurity Game Changers Fellow with the Pandemic Center, among other roles. I'll be moderating today's discussion. Today, we're joined by three distinguished guests who will be helping us navigate the complex landscape of regional policies for artificial intelligence-enabled biodesign. Let me introduce our fantastic panelists. Dr. Suresh Namdeo is a senior research analyst at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and a fellow at of the Asia Center for Health Security at the National University of Singapore. Suresh is also a member of the Indian National Young Academy of Science and leads several policy research projects on biosecurity and science diplomacy. Previously, he served as the Science and Technology Consultant for the Biological Weapons Convention at the United Nations. He also served as the co-chair of the expert committee of a multinational project of the U.S. National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, titled Biological Threats in the Age of Emerging Biotechnology. He's a member of the advisory board of the International Biosecurity and Biosafety Initiative for Science, IBIS, and a member of the AI Bio Global Forum. He holds a PhD in molecular biology from the Max Planck Institute for Biology in Germany. Thanks for joining us today. Then we have Dr. Sarah Carter. She's a principal at Science Policy Consulting, LLC. For over 15 years, she has focused on advances in the tools and capabilities for engineering biology, biosecurity screening frameworks, and international norms for biosecurity. In recent years, she has supported the Nuclear Threat Initiative, NTI, on projects related to DNA synthesis screening and the implications of artificial intelligence for biosecurity. She also works on policy issues related to the broader bioeconomy as a senior fellow at the Federation of American Scientists. Previously, she worked in the Policy Center of the J. Craig Venter Institute and at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, OSTP. She's a former AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow and a former Mersanian Fellow of the National Academies. She earned her PhD from UCSF in the US. Thank you for joining us. And finally, Dr. Rick Blage leads the Biosecurity Office at the National Institute of Public Health and the Environment in the Netherlands. Having joined in 2006, he initially focused on biosafety risk assessments for gene therapy studies using genetically modified organisms at the GMO office. Since 2009, he has actively contributed to the development of a comprehensive biosecurity policy for the Netherlands, leading to the establishment of a biosecurity office in 2013. In this capacity, he advises ministries on biosecurity, acts as a liaison between scientific professionals and the government, and advocates for biosecurity awareness among students, scientists, and laboratory professionals. Since 2021, he has co-chaired the International Experts Group of Biosafety and Biosecurity Regulators, representing the Netherlands and the EU region. Welcome, and thank you all for joining us today. We're very excited about this conversation. Just to give a bit of an overview, today we'll start with some definitions and background, then dive into regional regulatory landscape, and if time allows, we'll explore some alternative initiatives as well. And then at the end, we will finish with some of the questions from the audience. As a brief housekeeping note, for those tuning in, please send us your questions using the Q&A function in Zoom. Hopefully you can see it at the bottom. Whenever they come up. We will try to cover them in text as they come up, and if not, we'll cover some of them towards the end of this seminar. Thank you all. For the panelists, I also encourage you to build on each other's responses. So I'll be guiding you with a few questions. Think of this as a dynamic conversation rather than 3 separate interviews. So feel free to jump in, to agree, disagree, or add nuance to each other's comments. So let's start. Suresh, let's start with some of the fundamentals. So the terminology in this space is evolving and can be confusing sometimes. We hear about LLMs, AlphaFold, protein design, AI bioconvergence, and biodesign tools. In the context of today's conversation, how would you define AI-enabled biodesign, and how does it relate to, compare to, or differ from the commonly used terms?
Thanks so much, John, for having me and for the team, organizing team, having me here. Well, as the name suggests, the AI-enabled biodesign tool generally refers to the using AI, like tools that use AI for design and discovery of biological molecules, systems, and processes. Now, a large number of these AI-enabled biodesign tools involve machine learning and generative models on existing biological data to also better understand the biological system while accelerating this whole process of design, build, test, and learn cycle, right? A major focus of the biodesign tools is on designing and understanding also the interactions of different biomolecules with each other. And these biomolecules, of course, include things like proteins, DNA, RNA, and also a lot of small molecules that are involved in cellular processes. There are a number of AI-enabled biodesign tools that are out there, or biological design tools, as they are called sometimes, that are out there. Some of them you already mentioned, the Rosetta, AlphaFold, and RF Diffusion, and a number of them are doing a lot of these interesting functions they have, right? And again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of them is about interaction between these biomolecules and also how the new kind of biomolecules can be designed and synthesized. Now, there are a number of relevant terms that are there when it comes to biodesign tools of different kind. But there are also more broader terms, right? People use things like AI and biology or AI and life sciences, which is more broader than the biodesign tools side of AI, right? Because it refers to a broader set of functions that including the large language models and lab automation practices, etc. Now, another term that is often used is AI in biodesign or AI in drug discovery, and these are more narrower set of terms which which refer to the specific function of AI tools in either designing proteins or these therapeutic chemicals or compounds, right? There have been also these terms in these very well-established fields of computational biology and bioinformatics and so on. And these fields have a very long history, and they are more about analyzing and managing biological data rather than having kind of a generative functions that many of these biodesign tools have. Finally, it is very important to keep in mind that there is a huge significance of these tools that are being very rapidly developing. So there are, I think, more than thousands of these biodesign tools that are out there, and they are totally transforming many sectors within life sciences. And it was acknowledged in last year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry, which was given to AlphaFold and Rosetta. So maybe I would stop here, and maybe if other panelists would like to comment further on this.
Sarah or Rick, you can definitely jump in, but I would also like to ask, that was really helpful context. Thank you, Suresh. Maybe as a follow-up, so you mentioned a few of the applications, but I would love for you to expand a bit on this as well and tell us a bit about the bright side, the best side of these like AI-enabled biodesign tools, and more generally AI for biology. What are they actually enabling?
Yeah, definitely, John. So there are a number of benefits, and as I was mentioning, there is a significant transformation that is already happening because of this AI design tools. And it is across different sectors. When we talk about, let's say, medicine, these tools can significantly reduce they are significantly reducing the development time for several diagnostic and therapeutic measures that are being developed by many major companies, drug companies, pharma companies around the world. They are also significantly boosting the research in many of these areas. Let's say developing a cancer drug or a basic research even in many of these fields, right? Also, it is important to keep in mind they are also that its significance is being realized by companies and governments. The funding agencies and governments. For example, SEPI has this 100-day mission to develop vaccines, and they are using AI tools in that process as well. Also, within medicine, I think one area that might benefit a lot from this is the area of personalized medicine, where AI design tools can play a big role, just going through the genomic or proteomic side of an individual and try to come up with specific measures to treat that person. Now, in the area of agriculture, AI-assisted design could also help create crops that are better climate resilient and pest resilient, which is a very important concern at the moment. Also, they could help engineer microbes that can help fix the nitrogen better in the soil and help improve the soil quality, right? The AI design tools could also accelerate the already ongoing industrial effort towards these alternative proteins and alternative food options which are more sustainable. And lastly, I believe from the environmental side, it could also increase the efficiency of the different microbes that are being developed for carbon capture, and microbes and plants that are being designed for carbon capture, and also can help with bioremediation more effectively. But it is important to keep in mind that all of these, these functions are in combination with some existing biotech technique, whether it's a synthetic biology or other kind of genome editing tools and so on. So these are some of the benefits. There are, of course, a lot more that are emerging, and we are slowly learning about it as things progress. Thanks.
What is very clear is that we have a million great applications. Sarah?
Yeah, I just want to jump into, Suryash did a great overview of a lot of the benefits and the state of the field, but one thing that I just want to highlight is that some of the benefits he mentioned and the benefits that AI might have do involve whole pipelines and processes, and some of that is going to be automated, including by agentic AI systems, and we're just starting to see what those might even look like, and that is something that's really emerging now about what that looks like, what should we do about that, how can we secure that, and that's where some of the sort of the risks are least certain because it's still sort of coming together to see what those kinds of those more integrated capabilities are going to look like.
That's actually a perfect segue to my follow-up question to you, Sarah. So there's always kind of a flip side to the coin. Can you tell us a bit about what could go wrong with these AI-enabled biodesign capabilities? What specific biosecurity concerns might you have?
Yeah, so the risks are pretty diverse. I mean, we just told you the benefits. They're all over the map, and the risks as well are similar. One thing that I'll mention is that the NTI, the Nuclear Threat Initiative, hosts the AI Bio Global Forum that was mentioned already, and they just recently released a high-level statement on risk that tries to pull together kind of what the concern is in a concise, in a concise way. But the types of things that we hear about are, first of all, to what extent do these large language models, especially the frontier models like Gemini and ChatGPT and Claude, to what extent do they provide uplift in the laboratory. So to what extent do they help people, especially novices in the lab, do more in the lab, sort of, increase their capabilities, increase the possibility and the probability that they can actually produce, something, an engineered pathogen, for example, that could cause harm. And so that's sort of one whole body of work, and there's been a lot of focus on that, especially with the big, industry labs. Another one, the biological AI tools that Surya, was talking about, and I think is a major focus here. A big concern there is that you could sort of raise the ceiling of harm. So there, for example, you could design a pathogen, especially somebody that's knowledgeable, that may have access to some kind of laboratory infrastructure. They could create, a pathogen. They could perhaps those that are not found in nature, perhaps some that are worse than those found in nature. To me, that kind of concern is a little bit less certain, and there's a lot of uncertainty about whether the data that we have out there on things like transmissibility, how bad is the next COVID variant, for example. It's very hard to predict those things because we don't have data to support those predictions. And in the same way, it's difficult to see, if a model, a biological model could predict that without that kind of data. At the same time, there's uncertainty about that. It's not clear to what extent these more powerful models could infer different characteristics, and so that there's a whole body of discussion about what, how big a risk that's going to be. And like I said, there's also these kind of pipelines for automated science. There's, the potential for accidental or deliberate misuse, especially if these things get very, complex. With these agentic systems, it's not clear exactly how they're going to be integrated with the biological technologies and the tools and capabilities for engineering and manufacturing biology. And so there's a little bit of there's a risk there, and people talk about how to just ensure that people remain in the loop to make sure that things are not going off the rails, or that these agentic systems are making decisions the way that we humans would want them to. So that's sort of like the broadest, sort of categories of risk that we're talking about here. One last sort of niche risk that we're already seeing is that these, especially protein design tools, are able to produce protein sequences that are very unlike naturally occurring sequences, but that have similar functionality. And there's a concern that those types of sequences can escape biosecurity screening that's already in place, especially the big commercial DNA providers that screen the DNA to see if it matches pathogen or toxin DNA, and then screen the customers to make sure that there's a legitimate use. And so when these protein design tools come up with these sort of novel sequences, those DNA companies don't know what to do with that sequence, and they can't tell if it's if it's related to pathogens or toxins. And so it can sort of it can reduce the certainty and sort of throw a wrench into that type of screening. So there's so that risk is something that we're already seeing. It's not clear how big a risk that's really going to be in the long run, and these tools could also help solve that problem for DNA providers when those tool developers and providers can come together.
That's very helpful. Thanks, Sarah. So what's very clear is that these risks exist within a spectrum. Some of them have like higher magnitude or lower magnitude. Some of them are here today. Some of them could be here in the future. Some of them might be merely theoretical, and clearly they are complex and nuanced, and they sort of depend on one another. Now, given the potential risks you outlined so far, clearly we must have multiple safeguards, laws, guidance, and oversight bodies in place, right? I would imagine. So let's examine how different regions are actually responding to the challenges posed by artificial intelligence and its convergence with biotechnology and biological research. Throughout the world, we're seeing multiple regional initiatives to regulate AI, including the EU AI Act, the AI Action Plan from the US. We have China's AI Safety Governance Framework, Brazil's AI Bill, and many others. Now, let me ask each of our panelists today about their respective regions. And Breck, I'm going to start with you. What's the current state of AI regulation and legislation in Europe generally? How are the European Union and its member states approaching this issue? What policies exist so far, and what are the key existing gaps?
Thanks, John. Well, that's a major question, of course. So you mentioned already the EU Act on Artificial Intelligence that's being developed now within the European Commission. Besides that, there is also an update on the Biotechnology Act, which is being drafted right now, in which we also would like to have AI technologies in place there. But besides that, I'm not really aware of any other AI acts or regulations within the European Union. Well, I know the UK has also a policy in place. But speaking for the Netherlands, for instance, we don't have anything related to AI. It's all up to knowledge safety, in which we have a big issue here with biotech industry, but also chip industry, etc. But specifically on AI biotech, there is nothing in place. So that's one of the things in which the Biosecurity Office steps in forward here, is to raise awareness about the capabilities of AI with biotechnology, as Suresh already explained, but also all the risk that could potentially pop up, as Sarah has explained. And it's not only about that the ceiling of harm will be increased, but also more people have potential access to the technology without the basic knowledge you normally need for protein design, for instance. So that's one of the things that we would like to do, is to raise awareness about this. And a good example of what we always use for academia, but also scientists, is the MegaSen tool, which is a protein design tool. It's designed to search for new proteins with low toxicity and high specificity. So they come up with a lot of proteins, but on the other side, you can also change that program to search for high toxic molecules. And indeed, that has been shown that it is capable of producing new molecules with a very high amount of toxicity that are not really existing out there. So that's the other side of the coin here. You can use it for good, for medicine development, etc., but you can also misuse that. And that's one of the things that we like to stress to the scientific community about the potential risk of AI in biotech.
Thanks, Rick. And as a follow-up, I think it's a pretty general truth that many of these AI regulations either don't specifically address the risks associated with AI bio, or if they do, it's pretty superficial and sort of like in a very general way. One of the challenges with the AI bioconvergence and how to regulate these risks is that we're trying to have regulation on AI. We definitely have regulation for biotechnology and biological sciences, either from the biosafety point of view. We have regulation around synthetic biology, regulation around how to conduct research safely in a research setting. My question for you would be, what is the best place to house this sort of new regulation? Does it have to be a standalone? Does it need to be housed within existing regulation? Should we be pushing to implement this regulation for AI bio within this new emerging AI regulation? Where does it sit? Everywhere? Nowhere?
Also, again, a good question. I don't have a really specific answer to that. What it is really important is with the AI technology is within information technology and computer science, whereas biotechnology is within the life sciences with biologists, chemists. So that these are completely different fields, and you should combine those fields. You should merge them, bring them together to understand the risks that are there. So if you make a specific AI legislation, it will not cover the biotechnology. And on the other hand, if you make a biology regulation like biosecurity, it does not cover AI. So there should be conversions between that. So that would be the best option, I guess.
Sarah, go for it.
Yeah, Yes, I think it'd be great to have sort of, some convergent things. I think too that, it's sort of a question of, well, is it an AI issue or is it a bio issue? And really it's, it's both, and whatever AI frameworks you come up with, which have been pretty slow and piecemeal and extremely voluntary and, uncertain, those do need to incorporate some bio component to them. But at the same time, we already have 40 years of oversight of bio and biotech and biosafety and all of these types of things to build on. But we need to make sure that all of those bio governance pieces incorporate AI. And I think that is, I hope that that's the direction we're going and that we can, see those different things. I was like surprised to see in the US, DNA synthesis screening is something that's been, part of U.S. government guidance, and policy since 2010. But both the Biden administration, that an executive order in October 2023, and also the Trump administration, more recent executive order on May 5th, and the Trump AI action plan all supported this, this framework for DNA synthesis screening. And to me, I was like, oh, I didn't know that that's an AI issue now, because it's always just been a synthetic biology, kind of longstanding biotech issue, but it's been sort of adopted into kind of AI policy at this point. And I think that is one way that they're converging, as Rick said, as those pieces are coming together in a productive way there. However, I also think that that's not, that is one layer of biosecurity in this system, and there need to be many more. And I think a lot of people are hanging their hat just on that little spot because that's where the digital designs become physical biology. But I do think that there's, many more things that can be done.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And I think this nucleic acid synthesis example is a great example about how we could start like converging the legislations and make sure everyone is aligned. But clearly, it's just like one first line of defense against one very specific application of AI. Clearly, there's much, much more out there. So Riyash, did you have a comment as well?
Yes, thanks, John. So I first of all, I fully agree with Sarah's point and also many points that Rick had mentioned. I think both from the AI side and bio side, there needs to be a push on this issue, and that is being done in many cases. But I would also say that it might vary a lot between different countries. So some countries and regions, it might come more from the biosecurity side, and in other places, it might be more from the AI side, right? I think it is important to build the bridges between these two communities when these things are being discussed. So when the AI-related things are being discussed, there should be some biosecurity people being present on the table, sharing their thoughts on how this should be done, and vice versa with the bio thing as well. Right. So I think that's where a lot of effort should go, and a lot of policy professionals like us should, contribute in that direction. But I thought I would also mention a little bit about India in this context. In India, we don't have any specific law or regulation either on AI safety or on biosecurity, right? So we don't have on either of them that could regulate the biodesign tool in a precise manner. But what we do have is a number of existing rules and regulations in other domains that could be applied in this area. So, for example, there is an Environmental Protection Act that has some biosafety regulations, which could be, in certain contexts, be applied to AI biosafety, AI bio interface as well. There are the things like Weapons of Mass Destruction Related Act, right, which could be applied if someone is using as a non-state actor is trying to build a bioweapon using AI biodesign tools, right? So there are a number of such things that are out there, which can, depending on the context, be used in this thing. And this gives, I think, whoever is the regulatory authority or whoever is the person in charge, a lot of discretion to decide on things, right? And which might not be the best thing. So we really need to have something more specific, either coming from AI side or from bio side, which has a component of the other side and says that, yes, even though it is about, let's say, about AI, there is a paragraph on biosecurity, as we have seen in the US AI action plan, where the last paragraph is actually about biosecurity. So something like that, I think, has to come up in other places as well. I think why it is not why don't we have something more specific on either on basically on this AI bio interfaces? There are there are very few people who are advocating for it at the moment in our country. We have very few people who have that kind of expertise that could talk about this thing and advocate to the policy professional. There are a number of resource constraints. We don't even know how many people are using these tools and what tools are being used in the country. So these are some of the basics that have to be covered before we go to more, more mature discussion at the policy level on these things. Thank you.
Sarah, you want to build on that?
No, I agree with Suryash that we're still very nascent in what we would even want to tell people to do. One of the things that I emphasize a lot is that there is very little, if we did want to write a policy that says, you should do this, we have to know what this is. We've identified risks, but there are actually especially related to, biological AI tools, but there's very few. What are you supposed to do if you identify a risk? And we don't have effective guardrails developed. We don't have screening systems. We don't have guidance about, managed access, about, who should have, access to different things. And we don't have anything to point to. So even if you had somebody that was very willing, an academic scientist, for example, who's developing, a pathogen-related, AI, tool that would predict, pathogen variants. There's almost nothing. There's a total lack of guidance or tools or resources for them to go to try to develop that thing responsibly. And before you can get to adherence to policy, you need to develop best practices, and that's something that I think is going to be really important. And this is part of the kind of, everybody says, oh, we need agile governance, but I think this is what that means. What that means is that you have to let the community and fund the community to develop different kinds of solutions to see what really works in different contexts. And then once you have some of those practices, then you can start to figure out what the best practices are, and then you can start to build incentives and even policy, guidance, regulation, other kinds of requirements to get people to follow those best practices. But we are not anywhere close to that right now, and I think that that's a major downfall of this right now. Just on Suryash's point about kind of how you can use AI, sort of whatever train is moving, you want to hitch your policy idea to it, whether that's biosecurity or AI, and I think that is absolutely true. But it can lead to some dissonance, some cognitive dissonance, especially that I'm noticing in U.S. government policy, where the AI action plan, the first 95% of it says, let her rip, like all open weight models, like let's support all the data centers we can. It's very, very pro AI. And then you get to the bottom and it has this little biosecurity addendum at the very last thing. But at the same time, the U.S. government at the moment has been very suspicious almost of virology research. It's been really focused on the risks of that research. It's but not wanted to fund it and that sort of thing, which is really, to my mind, kind of opposite to that idea. One thing that I'm looking at in the U.S. is that there's policy development happening right now based on the executive order that came out in May on biosafety and biosecurity. And it mentioned DNA synthesis screening that we've already talked about a little bit, but it also mentioned what it called dangerous gain-of-function research. And it's possible that in the next week or so, when there's policy, the executive order called for policy development, that there could be an announcement that talks about in silico resources or other things that are related to dual use research of concern and those sorts of things that could have implications for especially the kind of highest risk biological AI tools. So that, but it does sort of lead to, you can sort of see how the AI policy development and the bio policy development can go in different directions and it has to come back together at some point.
Suryash, back to you.
Yes, sorry, I totally agree with Sarah. I just wanted to add maybe a couple of more things. So there are a number of, and this is also to partly answer the question that is there in the Q&A. So there are a number of international bodies, in UN bodies, that are coming up with these guiding principles and guidance and of different kinds. right? And ethical principles and so on. For example, UNESCO has ethical principles, and the UN just established a couple of mechanisms related to AI. So those are very, very important, but we have to keep in mind that those are more normative, and they are kind of setting the tone for things. Like they don't have any implementation related powers at the moment. So on the other hand, the industry side is to some extent trying to develop some kind of industry guideline, industry best practices and so on. But there is still a huge disconnect between these two. The things that are coming up from the national level bodies and international bodies like UN, and at the national level, for example, in India, we have Indian Council of Medical Research that has come with some AI related principles for biomedical research and healthcare. But there is again a very much huge difference between how industry is thinking about, how OpenAI is thinking about. So there is a need to bridge those gaps as well. And that's where I think a lot of policy focus should go about. And one of the places where it could be tackled to some extent is these big AI summits being organized every year or half yearly basis. Last one was in Paris. The next one will be in India, the AI Impact Summit in New Delhi. Right, so this could also be an avenue where some of these gaps could be bridged between different ways and how industry is thinking about it and how governments and intergovernmental bodies are thinking about it. Thanks.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rick.
Rick, go for it, and then Sarah.
Yes, well, I agree with all you said, of course, and it's good to mention those risks and how to mitigate those risks by drafting legislation, policies, etc. But it all comes on responsible science. So the scientists themselves are really responsible what they're doing in their laboratories, whether it is biotechnology or AI and biotech. And that's what we are focusing on. And those scientists, they all started as students at universities. And that is the thing where you have to start with education. So that is what we also do in the Netherlands now to try to educate biosafety, biosecurity, responsible science, dual use issues for students in life sciences, because those students will finally end up in the laboratories and performing all those activities. So I think that's really a low-hanging fruit, although it's quite difficult to get that into the curriculum of universities. But that's the thing where we can start to educate the students about biosafety, biosecurity risk, AI, biotech risk, how to mitigate that, but also how to identify it. And that's a really important thing because we're doing now several lectures at the University of Leiden and Utrecht. And the students will submit their first project proposal. And we always can find some dual use issues within that proposal. And if you ask them, the students, well, did you know that you can also misuse your the proposal? They never thought about it. And that's where you have a really a light bulb in the students to see, oh, this is a biosecurity issue. So start with education. We are really enforcing that. We're developing now e-learning modules for students because we cannot educate at all the universities. So that is something that can be spread widely, but also use different tools that we've been developed, such as the dual use quick scan, which is a quick tool for researchers. And we have more tools for researchers and by risk management advisors to mitigate the risk. But the most important thing is to raise awareness and that people and scientists are aware how to identify specific biosecurity risk in there.
Yeah, I would just say I agree with Rick 100% that that it is going to have to start with that education. And I think that our institutions, especially our academic institutions, are going to need to play a bigger role in that kind of education, and in just in biosecurity in general. I think in the future, I think that's going to be a very important piece of this puzzle. I initially had an intervention though about Suryesh's point about sort of intergovernmental coordination. And I think that one of the things that is happening now is that there are several across the world. There are AI safety institutes, ACEs, being set up. In the U.S., it has changed its name. It's now CASE, the Center for Center for AI Standards and Innovation. In the UK, it's the AI-Security Institute now. But there are several of these, across the world that I think can be really good places to sort of focus efforts within governments and also to interface between governments to have productive conversations. And at least the US and UK models of those institutes have been very agile, have done a good job of including industry stakeholders, of helping to share best practices about risk evaluations, what you can do, how to think about these different topics. And I think that those could be a good model moving forward for how we can deal with this AI bio issue. I will say that in the US, the bio division there is, 2 or 3 people right now. It's very underfunded and is not, doing as much as I think they could. But I really hope that they will get what they need and can really help be agile in this way, as well as helping to interface with other governments and other not just governments, but like the EU, for example, I think has their own AI safety institute already stood up as well.
Thank you. That's great. And I think it's a great segue. I'm glad we're talking about coordination and to some extent harmonization efforts. We have clearly described that the problem is quite complex. It involves multiple communities, including researchers, both on the model development as well as on the bio side, policymakers, there's industry, there's government, and then you have all the complexities of regional differences and potentially like different approaches we could take. In a way, I think like part of the challenge is also with the incentives. Like, what are the incentives to make sure that we're regulating AI? It's moving very quickly. So far, we're mostly feeling the promising side of AI, but we're all sort of like a bit worried about what might happen if some of these AI tools are improperly discussed. And with that sort of mindset in mind, I want to ask one of the questions from the Q&A, if that's okay. It's open, so to anyone who wants to comment, I would love to hear your thoughts. The question is, how worried should countries like India and others be about regulating AI bio risks? Should countries that are not necessarily developing the tools be worried at all about these issues to begin with, and why? Who would like to take that question?
Well, I can say that. I mean, the types of risks we're concerned about could be, global pandemics, and so everybody should be worried about it. But it is true that in terms of developing safeguards, and actually mitigating those risks, those solutions are likely going to start with the model developers and be sort of built out. I do think that and most of that model development is in the US, Europe, but not exclusively in those places. And my hope is that we can start to develop some of those practices, risk mitigations, guardrails, managed access frameworks that can preserve some equitable access. And kind of as the technology proliferates around the world, those safeguards can proliferate with them. So to me, that's sort of, that's sort of my hope there. But if that model is going to be effective, we need to make sure that the safeguards and the approaches that we pursue are going to work in all of those places, are going to make sense to those different people. So to me, it's really important to engage that whole world and those different stakeholders early on so that we can make sure that it's a durable long-term solution to these kinds of problems.
If I may just add to Sarah's point, while I totally agree that there can be certain global catastrophic risks of different kinds and pandemic risk that can affect the whole globe, but I do think there can be also specific risk to different countries and regions, right? And it depends on that country's security environment. It's a number of other factors. It's the socioeconomic development level, the kind of capacity it has, and all of that. So in context of developing countries, there can be certain risks as well. But the problem is that those risks have not been mapped yet. right? So I think what needs to be done as a first step is a serious policy research exercise to understand those risks. First of all, understand what are the AI bio design tools that are being used in different places. What kind of actors are using those tools? So that kind of mapping as a first step to understand those risks is needed. And I think that has not happened as it should at the moment. Thanks.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think part of the challenge here, and I think that's what the question was alluding to some extent, is the fact that the benefit sharing from these AI tools might not be completely even. And unfortunately, some of the risks could be very like rapidly spread out. For example, in the case of a virus or whatever might actually be developed. Going back to the conversation around coordination and how best to make this work. So if different regions, including within a single country, are taking different approaches, and I think we agreed that we might need to take a pretty, diverse approach to regulating AI bio generally. We've talked slightly about, some AI centers around the world being able to coordinate some of this oversight. We've talked briefly on things like the UN and other bodies regulating aspects of AI bio. What other approaches could we be taking? What other approaches need to be put in place right now for that coordination to come together? Rick, would you like to comment on this?
Well, a tough question, of course. I mean, well, we've all seen now the Biological Weapons Convention. It's now in place for over 50 years, if I'm correct. It's a great convention, but still it lacks really a verification mechanism. So the problem with the Biological Weapons Convention is that all the countries that participate have to agree to move forward with a certain step, also with AI biotech definition. So that's really a problem. So what are the other organizations that could pick this up? It could be, for instance, the World Health Organization. There are different technical advisory groups within there. I'm part of the advisory group on responsible use of life sciences and dual use research. And with that working group, we also focus on AI tools. But still, it's a World Health Organization, but focus mainly on human health. But the AI biodesign tool also can be used for animal health and plant health. So these are, again, other different organizations. So it's really difficult to have them all under one umbrella somewhere. So the best way is to communicate and work together with the different organizations to draft a policy or regulation that really fits for all. But still keeping in mind that all the countries have different governments institute structures, some of them top down, some of them are bottom up, some of them in between. It should all work for them. So that will be a really challenge to get this done. But really looking forward for the NTI, for instance, but also IBIS to draft different guidelines on, for instance, DNA sequence screening. Because that is also a global effort in which all the sequence companies should be part of it. And then we have a kind of standards. But you also have the ISO norms that can also be useful as a global norm, for instance. But still, the ISO norm it's really also about all the countries that are participating have to agree. So it will be less effective, I guess, more vague language within there. So we all have to work together to make this happen.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so just a bit of a time check. We have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to take this opportunity to remind all of the listeners to write their questions in the Q&A if they have any. There's already plenty of great questions, so also a reminder for the panelists. If you get a chance to just read some of them and reply to whichever ones are relevant to you, that would be great. Before I take a couple final questions from the Q&A, I have one short question for the three of you. So this has popped up here and there throughout the conversation. Clearly, there's multiple ways in which we can try to create a safer space for the AI bioconvergence. We've talked about teaching courses, we've talked about some research-led initiatives, as well as there's efforts to have agreements and guidelines for funders. For each of you, if you want to take a couple minutes to just briefly describe one of the initiatives you have been involved in this space, something that you would like to highlight, now is your chance. Who would like to start?
I will start. As mentioned already, I've been working closely with NTI for a couple of years on this. We produced a report almost a year ago now on guardrails for biodesign tools. Since then, NTI has been pursuing some of the pilot projects suggested there, including a metadata standard, for example, that basically provides a little bit more context about how a tool was used and how a sequence was derived, that can then be shared for biosecurity screening and just for tracking and other uses. And that metadata standard is now published as a white paper that was in collaboration with Lattice Automation. I've been working on a project on developing a managed access framework for biodesign tools, for what we are calling now biological AI tools, to make it slightly broader. And I hope that will be out within the next year or so. I know too that I'm really as a consultant, I've also just recently signed a contract with CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, and they have a whole AI pipeline of vaccine development, and they're interested in making sure that no part of that is misused. And so they are not only working on those things, and I'll be helping them with that, but also they're hoping to develop that as a model for other kinds of pipelines, other types of biodesign processes. And I think that there's a lot going on out there that researchers can pick up on and start to implement. And I think that there's a lot of interesting just ideas. As I mentioned, you have to, before you can get best practices, you have to develop practices. So people just need to try different things and see what works, so that we can then raise the best of those to the top to really start to implement them more broadly.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think that touches on some of the questions asked in the Q&A. There might not be a silver bullet for this sort of problem. You might need to take multiple different approaches, and we're still learning how best to implement them and how best to make them work together. Suresh and Rick, any other comments on other efforts to make this space safer?
Maybe. Yeah, Rick, go ahead if you want.
It's not specifically on AI, but more on responsible science, in which we now developed an infographic within the Biosecurity Office, and this infographic is about mitigating dual use risk. Dual use is also an issue regarding AI and biotech, of course. And then within this infographic, it's really a nice explanation for researchers, but also by risk management advisors, how to address risk, how to identify risk using the dual risk quick scan, for instance. But also on the backside of this infographic, there is a list of questions and that can be used by the risk management advisor to have a conversation with the researcher about a certain research project or a paper that they've been publishing or would like to publish. To have a discussion going on a low level about a research project, because we all understand if you're a researcher, you have no time for those things regarding dual use issues. You just want to do research and publish. That's it. So that's what we're trying to do to make a bridge between the risk management advisor and the researcher, and that has been highlighted within this dual use quick scan, but also the infographic, which can be found on our website. And of course, we are developing education modules. We first launched now a test version for students, but we also have version for researchers, risk management advisors, but also management, because management is also a key to have that in your organization, that should foster biosecurity issues in there.
Amazing.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, very quickly, I think the AI bio-related work is a component of the broader work I do in biosecurity policy. And here I've been involved with the AI Bio Global Forum that Sarah leads, and also a number of other advocacy and awareness raising activities that I do in India. So a number of articles, like published some, and some are in the pipeline, but also organizing high-level roundtables that have policy experts from different sites coming together and discussing these issues. Also, I've been involved in designing certain scenario exercises that is to train early career professionals about what you do when something bad happens, and it's like a long scenario of 5-6 different steps, and bad things happen, and how the participants respond. It's their evaluation is also part of the process. So these are like some of the things that I've been involved in. But I thought use this opportunity to also answer one of the questions that is in the Q&A by Shrestha about geopolitical frictions that are going on and how do we manage these issues in this time. I think one of the how I've been trying to do is just engage with people at the academic level, and the government to government interaction. Sometimes the track one is very, very difficult, but you can still have this track two kind of communications going on. You engage with as many academics as you can, people on the other side on different countries, and I think those kind of bridges are needed, and they can be very fruitful when the geopolitical things become better again. So I think this is something which is not in our control, but we have to engage with as many people as we can on all sides to build those bridges. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just chime in there on that point. I think Suresh is exactly right that we do need to do that sort of track two, that especially the academic to academic and like kind of civil society kinds of outreach across countries. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of there's been sort of an increasing competition between the U.S. and China, for example, but that sort of makes it even more important that we maintain some ties with Chinese colleagues who share interests in making sure that these tools are not misused. And I think that it does create difficulties sometimes, but when the governments can't meet as productively. But I do think that it just makes it more important that non-governmental, even non-industry people do those kinds of engagements.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think that's a beautiful note to end on. We've covered many topics today. Hopefully you're inspired by all the efforts happening in this space. And I'm sure as I speak for all of us, there's definitely a space for more people. So if you want to get engaged, please reach out. As I said, we're almost at time and we can't keep Suresh awake any longer. It's already quite late over there. So a few takeaways from me today. First, AI-enabled biodesign represents tremendous opportunity, but also significant risk. And as such, it necessitates deep understanding, careful assessment, and some nuanced regulation. Second, while regional approaches to AI are emerging worldwide, a bit slow, but they're emerging, those regulations specifically targeting AI-enabled biodesign and AI bio are lagging behind. Global coordination and harmonization challenges still remain quite substantial. And then the third point is that effective AI bio governance will likely require both those regulatory frameworks, but also other diverse stakeholder-led initiatives like the ones we have discussed today. With that, I would like to thank our excellent panelists, Dr. Sarah Carter, Dr. Rick Blade, and Dr. Suresh Namdeo. Thank you so much for joining us today and for the insightful discussion. There's lots of food for thought for me and I'm sure for the rest of the listeners. Please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you have follow-up questions. And before we close, I want to highlight a couple of things. One is Dina's podcast. It's called Biosecurity, Changing the Game. You can find it in any platform where you listen to your podcasts. Again, the video recording of today's sessions will be available on the Pandemic Center YouTube channel in about 1 week. Thank you to the production team. You have the QR code now displayed on the screen. Again, thank you to the production team for making this possible, and thank you all to our attendees for your engagement today. This concludes our Biosecurity Game Changers seminar. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you. Take care.